Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
And I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today, we're going to be discussing and reviewing Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harlequin. This particular film, which was released on February 7th, 2020, was directed by Cathy Yan and written by Christina Hodson. This is based on the Harlequin character created by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm for the Batman the Animated Series. This film features Margot Robbie as Harlequin, Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya, Ewan McGregor as Roman Sionis, a.k.a. Black Mask, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, a.k.a. The Huntress, Journey Smollett-Bell as Black Canary, and Ella J. Basco as Cassandra Cain. Just a little background in this about this film. The film's budget was $85 million, and the worldwide draw was $201 million. So it definitely made a profit. Just a little trivia for you. Cathy Yan is the first Asian woman to direct a superhero movie, and she is the second woman to direct a DC film after Patty Jenkins and the wonderful success she had with RJ's favorite character, Wonder Woman. So, or one of RJ's two favorite characters, I should say. Also, some other trivia that I kind of want to get into a little later in the discussion and review. But first, let me say to our viewers, if you have not seen this film yet, you want to go see it before you listen to us speak about it, because we're not doing a spoiler section. This is just going to be pretty much talking about the film from beginning to end. There will be some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, go ahead and watch it, and then come back and check us out. So, all of the preliminaries being dealt with here, we're going to jump right into it. So, what do you got, RJ?
Well, John, let me ask you something real quick, because this occurred to me. One of our early episodes of the Two Towers, going way back when Suicide Squad first came out, can be found out there on YouTube somewhere. And our review, as I recall, was more favorable than where a lot of people came in. I have had a chance to rewatch the movie a few times, and my opinion on it has not much changed. I actually like Suicide Squad. Certainly compared to a lot of things out there. And, to me, being more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy, I come at these things with not a lot of deep knowledge of many of the characters. However, I am a big fan of the Batman animated series, so I do have a lot of affection for Harley Quinn. And so I was there to watch Margot Robbie play Harley Quinn, and I got a lot of that. I very much enjoyed that. And coming into this movie, I was ready for them to take it to the next level with a lot more Harley Quinn and taking it to that R-rated level and having a good time with a trashy movie, and that's what I got. I think I like this more than Suicide Squad. But before I go any further, John, what's your remembrance of Suicide Squad, and has your opinion changed?
Yeah, I remember Suicide Squad, and for the casting of the film, I think it was spot on. I really enjoyed the casting. That was what I enjoyed most about Suicide Squad, was the casting. With regards to the story, I've watched it again, and my opinion has changed, although I don't have the hate for the film as some fans do. It dropped a grade for me, and I think it had a lot to do with the story focusing around the June Moon character, the Enchantress, the little magical elements of it. I think that was a little out of place with regards to how they could have, the direction they could have went with the film and the characters. I think that was really a major problem I had with the film, but it was significant enough to where, upon reviewing it, I think that it dropped it in score for me. I still don't hate the film. I do like the casting, and I think that they were working with something and it had potential. I'm really more excited now about the reworking that James Gunn is going to be doing for the Suicide Squad film, the new one that's coming out. I think that in and of itself is going to hopefully rectify the problems that myself and other fans may have had with the first film.
Okay. So, going further with your question, I came in excited over what I saw in the trailers. I thought the trailers were telling me this is going to be Harley Quinn and her buddies in a girl power action flick, kind of in the veins of maybe some sort of 70s exploitation girl power film from way back when. Not quite that trashy, but about that. And going up with the R rating and showing a bunch of folks have a lot of fun and kick some butt. And at that level where I wasn't taking it too terribly seriously, I had a whole lot of fun with it. Besides the just the enjoyment of the romp, I thought it was extremely well filmed. I really liked the artistic choices made. I thought the action was very well filmed. I will say, the first thing that occurred to me about 20 minutes in was it seemed like this should have been called The Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, or excuse me, The Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, subtitle Birds of Prey, because there's a whole lot of Harley Quinn here and very little of Birds of Prey until more than an hour into the movie. As someone who didn't much care, I didn't mind that, though I could see how some folks may bristle at that point. I was there to watch Harley Quinn raise some hell, and that's what I got. And so for me, it was a lot of fun. I did have some quibbles, but I'm going to pause here and let you comment.
Yeah, I pretty much had the same sentiment with regards to the title and the distribution of film time and focus on character with this film. It was definitely a Harley Quinn film with the Birds of Prey as, backdrop, secondary characters. And that kind of is where I want to get back into the trivia with regards to the Birds of Prey. So let's just, for those who don't know, who may not be as familiar with the comics, the Birds of Prey in the comics originally consisted of Black Canary, a.k.a. Dinah Lance, and Oracle, a.k.a. Barbara Gordon, who was formerly Batgirl. So those two by themselves were Birds of Prey. Nobody else was in the group in the very beginning. It was just those two. And Oracle was sending Black Canary out on the missions. As Oracle, she was, as formerly Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, she was shot by the Joker in the spine and was crippled, confined to a wheelchair, and she operated out of a watchtower where she was a computer expert and logistics expert who would dispatch Black Canary on missions and monitor situations and so forth and so on. Very similar to the role that Felicity Smoke played on the Arrow CW series. Very, very similar. As a matter of fact, they kind of based Felicity Smoke's character off of the Oracle character from the comics. So just to be clear with the Birds of Prey, that was the original iteration. Later on, years later, Huntress, aka Helena Bertinelli, she joined, and she's like a loose cannon type female version of Batman. Originally in the comics, she was the daughter of Batman from Earth 2, a parallel universe where Batman was around during the 40s and had a daughter with Catwoman who later became a vigilante known as the Huntress. So a lot of people who aren't steeped in the comic book mythologies would not know that. Uh, just to be clear, Harlequin was never and has never been a member of the Birds of Prey in the comics. She's been associated with the Suicide Squad, not the Birds of Prey. So I thought it was interesting that they did this, and I know they were doing this because they wanted a female-centric film, and this was an opportunity for them to do that. Originally, they were going to go with the Gotham Sirens, which would have been Harlequin, Catwoman, Poison Ivy as the three main protagonists, and that would have been all villains. And I think that they were trying to go with an anti-hero type vibe here for this film, and that's why they went with the Birds of Prey. So with all of those things being said, it's also rumored that basically this will be the second film. Birds of Prey will be the second film in a Harlequin trilogy. The first would have been Suicide Squad, then the Birds of Prey, and then a third film called Gotham City Sirens. And that would be interesting depending upon the direction that DC EU goes in with regards to their films. So we'll have to wait and see if that comes to fruition. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about two of the main characters in this film, and then I'll get into one of the third characters in the film because it's a longer discussion. But Renee Montoya, the detective in this film, she's one of the most comic book accurate, down to the fact that she's a lesbian character. Just in case you didn't know, in the comics, Montoya was the former lover of Kate Kane, aka Batwoman. So there's a tie to the Bat family mythologies from the comics. She appears at the end of the film along with Huntress and Black Canary to be a vigilante, since she quits the GCPD and basically hooks up with them. But in the comics, an interesting thing is that she took on the persona of a masked vigilante called the Question. And I find that interesting because if they ever decide to do a sequel to this film, it would be my hope that they would give her that Question persona, that particular alter ego, because the Question is a character that DC acquired from Carlton Comics years ago, and that character has been used a lot in the DC animated universe for Justice League, the animated series, to great effect. And I have a fondness of that character as it dates back to the 80s when there was a nice run for that character, and it crossed over with the Blue Beetle. So it was another Carlton character, by the way, along with Captain Atom, who was another Carlton character. But I hope that they do the Question. I think the Question would make a great character to see on film, whether it be in the established DCEU or as a CW or DC Universe film, or series rather. I think that character would be great to see realized in live action. And then the other character that I wanted to talk about is Cassandra Cain, the young Asian girl who is the pickpocket in the film. A lot of people may not know if they're not familiar with the comics, but Cassandra Cain was not a little pickpocket girl like she's portrayed in this film. Initially, she was a child in her early teens when she was introduced. She was an assassin, and her parents were assassins. Her father was David Cain, who was a master assassin, and her mother was Lady Shiva, a master assassin and martial arts expert, who has appeared in Batman the Animated Series and the Justice League Animated Series as a character, and other subsequent DC Animated Universe films. So she's a very popular character tied to Ra's al Ghul and the Batman mythos. So also, Cassandra Cain in the comics was mute. She did not speak. Obviously, they went in an entirely different direction with the character for this film, and I think that it's somewhat interesting, but I think that if they were wanting to sell Cassandra Cain to me in subsequent films, you might want to give her a more action role and not just some kid that tags along with Harley Quinn, because then she becomes a third wheel and useless. And I don't like her being useless. I'm used to the character from the comics. And just a little trivia there, when Barbara Gordon was no longer Batgirl, Cassandra Cain took over as Batgirl for a short time. So it's interesting how the characters in the comics were portrayed as opposed to this film, and there's potential for them to rise into a more comic book accurate role. So I'm done now. Back to
Okay.
you.
Well, you make me think, as someone who is not as steeped in DC lore, I think I've got some deep knowledge of Harley Quinn a bit more, which I'll get into. But let's think everything else you've talked about. So, not being steeped into all that knowledge, I took Renee Montoya at face value. You know, they portray her as your archetype 80s cop. I took Cassandra Cain at face value. You know, the girl with the MacGuffin that everyone's trying to get at. And so what I wonder is, would they have been better? And then we're going to get into Black Mask, which I know is going to be a big conversation. I was barely aware of Black Mask. I knew little to nothing about any of that other stuff that you talked about. So taking them at face value and taking Roman Sionis as a gangster, just a gang leader, everything absolutely worked for me. So I wonder, would people have bristled less if maybe we used different names for the characters here, and maybe not attempt to bring in the fan service? It's almost, what I'm hearing is almost like the fan service worked against them. Like, could this have just been a random kid? And could this have just been a police captain or detective? And maybe where they got into trouble was trying to bring in the Black Mask and these other two characters when you have all this backstory and exposition, which they clearly didn't have time for, but also seems like they've upset the apple cart a little bit with the fans, in that they didn't portray what was promised. Having none of that baggage when I was watching the movie, like I said, I was actually enjoying Ewan McGregor as Roman Sionis. And then when he put the Black Mask on, to me it went from being a gangster leader to something that seemed unnecessarily complicated and dramatic, when I was just taking him, you know, as a gangster at face value. And to me that kind of threw things off, where I could feel like they were going for something that I couldn't quite get a sense of. And yet my understanding is those that are fans of that character, it was pretty much a failure. So I just wonder if maybe where this movie went off track was maybe trying to be a bit too squeeze too much in when it wasn't necessary. What are your thoughts?
Well, with regards to Renee Montoya, I think that making her who she was a good move. Okay. There would have been just a few tweaks that I would have made, and I think other fans would resonate with what I'm saying here. And you're good to go. They pretty much got Renee Montoya pretty accurate, comic book accurate. So I don't think that there's really much in the way of gripes where she's concerned. I was just saying that I hope that they explore the Question persona later that she adopted later on, which I think would be an interesting thing, especially since she's now at the end of this film, teaming up with Black Canary and the Huntress. As far as Cassandra Cain is concerned, I do think that they should have just had maybe a random kid and not been Cassandra Cain. I think that that was too much. I think adding her in, given the character's history, was a disservice to the character. I don't think they thought it through. Long game. Of course, DC is not known for their planning, such as like Marvel is with regards to their characters. That's why they tend to kill characters off that they shouldn't, at least not as early as they do, because there's more stories to tell from these characters, and they're trying to make dramatic, content, and they're not thinking things through for the bigger picture. And that's where DC falls into trouble with me, when it comes to their live action films. And as far as the Black Mask is concerned, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the biggest thing, the biggest problem I have with this film. The Black Mask was not portrayed accurately at all. I mean, just like you mentioned, he's just some gangster, and and then they made him overly flamboyant, and then the bored pretty boy, playboy who's got daddy issues and all this kind of stuff. And that's not who the Black Mask was in the comics. The Black Mask, Roman Sionis, was actually a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne's. And the Sionis family wanted to be associated with the Waynes so that they could, enjoy some of the status that the Wayne family had. He went a different direction as opposed to Bruce Wayne, who became Batman and basically became the gangster version of Batman. And he wore that black mask to conceal his identity and to forge an identity outside of the Sionis family. So that's why the Black Mask is an integral part of the character. And in my opinion, in this film, he should have had the mask on from the very beginning. And it should have only been intimate, points in the film where he took it off. Now, of course, they didn't want to do that because they had Ian McGregor, who's a big box office ticket draw and all of that. And of course, they want to show his face, and that's a disservice to this character. They should not have cast Ian McGregor as the Black Mask. They should have cast someone else so that they could have had him in the mask more from the very beginning. And that was one of the things that the Black Mask did. That mask was creepy. It basically looked like the Red Skull, only black. So that was one of the things that made the character who he was. That's why he was so intimidating to the people who came before him. And he enjoyed torture. And I think the film putting Victor Zsasz in it was a stroke of genius, but it's also a missed opportunity, because Victor Zsasz was another Batman antagonist who those scars on him were his kills. Every time he killed someone, he would scar his body, much like the Killmonger character in Black Panther. But he was nuts. And I think that while the actor in this film did an okay job of portraying Victor Zsasz, I think he was too much of a mindless henchman and not the cunning killer right hand that he could have been, and been more true to the comic book interpretation of the character. As far as the Black Mask in this film is concerned, it was the biggest disappointment that I had and the biggest problem I had with this film. They did not portray the character correctly. They made the fact that they decided to make him bisexual or homosexual, I'm not sure. They made that too much of a thing with regards to the way that he acted and the flamboyant, over the top manner in which he spoke and acted. I think that I don't have a problem that they changed the sexuality of this character, to what they did. But I think that it was more or less like they were trying to make a point as opposed to making it something natural with the character that flowed into his character, but also didn't detract from the character's origins. And I think that that's when you make a mistake, when you're trying to make a statement about something and you make it too boldly with a character and you don't integrate it into the essence of who the character is, overall. And again, that's nothing against changing, because I mean, obviously Black Canary was white in the comics, and we have Journey Smollett Bell playing the character, and she is Black. Although light skinned, she is Black. So that being said, you have some diversity, and I don't have a problem with diversity at all, especially being Black myself. But you have to make sure that what you're doing is not going to compromise the integrity of the character in any way that is going to be distracting. And I think that I found that more distracting than the addition of the mask. But I also, like I said, I'm more familiar with the Black Mask character. Just to give our viewers a little bit of a background with regards to the Black Mask character. He was first introduced in Batman 386 back in 1985 when RJ and I were teenagers. So that being said, the character has been around for a long time. And he's commonly depicted as a brutal and ruthless crime lord in Gotham City who has a fixation with masks and derives sadistic pleasure with regards to torturing those who cross him. That's why the Black Mask that he wears is an integral part, as I'd said before. But this is not the first iteration of this character outside of the comics. He appeared in the Batman, which was an animated series that ran in 2004. He also has made appearances in Batman Arkham, which was the video game franchise from 2009. And he appeared in the film Batman Under the Red Hood, which was an animated film that introduced the Red Hood, Jason Todd, formerly Robin. And that was a pretty good animated film. So, and then of course he appears here in Birds of Prey 2020. So I think that, they made it an obligatory prop when it should have been something much more significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to me it almost feels like watching Marvel TV movies of the 80s, where a lot of these characters are the characters in name only, it sounds like.
Right.
Like I said, coming in without a lot of that, I took everything at face value. There were a couple of things that were a bit jarring for me, maybe changing text just a little bit, but I noticed we're in Gotham City, and Gotham City to me means something, especially with so many Batman movies and TV shows and everything out there. I always think of the city itself as being kind of a character. And to me, this felt like bright and sunny New York was just filling in for the city, I mean, I didn't understand why they were even trying to claim that this took place in Gotham City, except that that's where Harley Quinn's supposed to be. But to me, I got no sense of the idea of, Gotham City as it's been portrayed to us through the years as a dark and brooding place. And then as I watched it, I thought, well, maybe we're seeing this through Harley's point of view, and so she sees everything a little bit on the Technicolor side. So that was kind of I know you're familiar with the expression "no prize" by Marvel Comics, where you try to explain away a flaw, So, but I did notice, like, wow, this is a very different Gotham City than the one that we've been accustomed to in various media. This was a bright and sunny place, even with all the stuff going on. So that was a bit jarring for me, but I kind of justified it that way. Let's see, what else can I talk about here? So yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, to me, coming at it without as much background knowledge, except for knowledge of Harley Quinn. I'm going to say I've not read a lot of Harley Quinn in the comic books, but I am familiar with her in other media. I have not seen the brand new show, but I've watched her entire arc on the animated series, which is where she started. So to me, that's kind of going back to the roots of the character. Some of the criticisms I've heard about Robbie's portrayal of the character, and the criticisms I thought were a bit bizarre. So there was one critic I watched after I'd seen the movie because I was curious what some folks were saying. Someone who considers themselves a big fan of the Harley Quinn character, among other things, said that Harley Quinn is smarter than this, that she was way too lucky in the film, which I just didn't see that. I'm like, Harley Quinn she's pure evil id. I mean, she just does things on a whim. She and Poison Ivy decided to go on a Christmas Eve shopping spree, basically robbing a retail store just on a whim. You know, she's gone off and been, when she got out of prison and tried to go straight, she ended up hanging off of a neon sign straw where Batman had to rescue her, except for a lot of the dumb decisions that she made. So to me, I thought that Margot Robbie's portrayal of Harley Quinn, as I understand the character, I thought was completely on point. I compared this to, we kind of talked about portrayals of Spider-Man, and my being a big Spider-Man fan, I always have to go into every media interpretation with which Peter Parker and which Spider-Man are we doing, you know. Even when there was only the initial comic books, Stan Lee and John Romita were doing a Sunday strip, which deviated considerably from the original run. And so once we started getting into Tobey Maguire had his own universe, and the 66 series had its own universe, and Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends made their changes, I just wonder what some of these complaints were about Harley Quinn, where it's like maybe they just didn't go with the interpretation you prefer, but that doesn't mean it was invalid. A lot of people complained about a lack of action, and I just did not see that at all. I thought it had plenty of action. It seemed like it whipped right along. So those that were complaining about Harley Quinn smarts would then turn around and say that they thought that Harley Quinn going through the police station with non-lethal weapons was also against her character. And I'm like, well, why would we want to just kill a bunch of police officers indiscriminately and have the law really coming down hard on you? To me, I thought that was kind of smart, and it made for a more fun, trashy film, which I think is really what they were going for. So there was a lot of stuff I found very confusing after the fact, after I'd seen the movie and seeing the complaints, and you can't help but wonder, like, how much of this is because, this was kind of they took some chances. They wanted to try and do something a little smaller budget. There were women in charge who had a certain vision. How many people wanted to trash that on purpose, and how much of this was actual legitimate complaints? It brought a lot of questions to my mind. And I thought that just coming at it as this is fun, I had fun with it. What's the problem here? It does make me wonder where maybe some people maybe just kind of need to take a step back and take it for what it is. No interpretation is perfect. So, all that said, obviously it sounds like they took on a bit more than maybe there were some smarter ways to handle some of this, but all I can say is, for my couple bucks for a Redbox rental, it was a lot of fun.
Well, I mirror those sentiments pretty much all the way. I don't think that I don't agree with the critics where they were critical with what you mentioned as far as the interpretation and portrayal of the character by Margot Robbie. I think that she does an excellent job. So I don't have any gripes where she's concerned with this. I just don't have a lot of the critical issues that some of the people have expressed who have critiqued or reviewed the film, with the exception, of course, with the Black Mask, which is, I have expressed that emphatically during this review and
Yeah.
discussions.
So
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I was just surprised. I will admit I was most surprised when I heard this movie announced, because I would not have thought that Margot Robbie would have been willing to come back to reprise this role. And apparently she clearly enjoys the heck out of playing this character.
Well,
I mean,
she was actually the one who pitched the Gotham City Sirens to Warner
Yeah.
Brothers DC. So it didn't surprise me that she wanted to come back, because I knew she was fond of the character from the very beginning. She had a lot of input in the way she portrayed the character in the Suicide Squad. So from the very beginning, I knew that she was really invested in this character. And during the course of interviews that I've seen with her from Suicide Squad, she really had a blast with this character. And so that's not surprising to me. I think that the amount of leeway that they've given her is something akin to Ryan Reynolds and his leeway with Deadpool.
there you go.
And
Yeah.
that is
Very
something
comparable.
that has actually made the films better than somebody in a suit that has no idea anything about the character or the flow of the character or the gist of the character coming in making decisions that turn out to be completely asinine, and the fans are going to be disgruntled with. Therefore, that will cause plummeting ticket sales and dismal return, and then they're complaining and scratching their heads talking about what happened, when if they'd have talked to the fans and let the creators and the people who are portraying these characters have a little bit of input, they would have been much better off. But one other thing that I want to mention here with regards to characters and actresses playing a character, one that did not get a lot of mention is Mary Elizabeth Winstead's portrayal of the Huntress, aka Helena Bertinelli. Now, I briefly touched upon that earlier, and I think that with that being the case, that I liked Winstead in the character for the most part. But I think the way that it was written at times was that she was a little bit more over the top. I think they should have went a little closer to the iteration from Justice League animated series of the character. I think that this portrayal was a bit, too over the top and angry. I think they were doing more Batwoman type anger with this character, because I guess they didn't have Batwoman, who eventually later on became a member of Birds of Prey in the comics. But I think they were trying to make an amalgam of the Batwoman character and the Huntress character, and I don't think that it worked as well as it could have had they let Huntress be who she was. If she was too angry, it just seemed over the top to me. She was more of a calculating character in the comics and in the Justice League Unlimited and Justice League animated series. And I think that would have been better served had they made the character more akin to those types of iterations. And I think that hopefully in the other films that they may spawn from this, that they do take heed to that and make her character more dynamic and less, angry, I'm a woman who's been scorned type thing, and more of a calculating, yes, this is revenge on the criminals who slaughtered my family. She was more of a detective in a lot of ways than was definitely given credit for here in this film, in this iteration. Outside of that, I think with some better writing that Mary Elizabeth Winstead would, continue to do the role justice, and I would look forward to seeing her in the role in future films.
I'm glad you brought her up, because I wanted to mention her earlier. Again, I'm only familiar with her to a limited extent. I remember the Birds of Prey CW show. Was it CW or WB at the time? I don't remember.
Oh, I think it was WB, and it was horrid.
It was not good. But my point is that the Huntress, I think, is one of the Birds of Prey characters that got the short stick here, because they blow through her origin story, and I was like, wait, that sounds interesting. That sounds like something I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that movie, frankly.
Right.
Kind of like, is it Cyborg in Justice League, where
Yes.
they tell you something and then they blow right past it, and you're like, as a movie viewer, I was like, wait, I'd like to. Why don't we pull that out and make that movie, please? Because that sounds interesting to me. So, I'd like to see that. If they did, I'd watch it. I thought that they went through her story way too quick. I thought the homage to Taxi Driver, I appreciated. I thought that was kind of fun, but for the most part, I did feel like, I understand it's Margot Robbie's film. We're going to spend all of our time on her, but she was definitely someone I found interesting enough that I would have liked to have gotten her full story, and I hope that in a future film we will get that. So,
Well, DC has a track record, unfortunately, with their live action films, putting the cart before the horse. That is evident in the fact that they rushed to make a Justice League film, which should not have been rushed to at all. They didn't earn the right to make a Justice League film, and it failed in box office. Well, not box office receipts, but more so in critical acclaim and being a good or great movie, because they wanted to try and keep up with the Joneses, aka Marvel. And this is a problem. They wanted to cram these characters in this film without giving them the justice that they really needed. Timing is everything. And with regards to this particular franchise, I think they would have been better served to have had something that was a little bit more of a in-depth introduction to some of these characters. And that all being said, despite that, I think that the film was good. I think it was a success. I look forward to more. I hope that they just improve in how they do things and the directions that they take the characters in. I want to touch upon the cinematography with regards to it being bright and sunny outside for Gotham. I agree it should have been a little bit more overcast. A lot of the modern, and that's after the Tim Burton films, which were basically had Gotham as very gothic cinematically and did not pattern after an actual city. But in the comics, Gotham is another name for New York, which the city was patterned after in the comics. However, when it comes to live action iterations of Gotham City, more recently, it's been patterned after Chicago, starting with the Batman Begins and Dark Knight and Dark Knight Returns. Those films were actually shot in Chicago, and I think that the Chicago backdrop was used for this film as well. But the night scenes were great. I think the night scenes were what they were supposed to be in this film. But I do agree with you that I think that through the lens of Harley Quinn, I think that's why you had daytime scenes and they looked the way that they did, because she's like a clown character. So there's got to be some kind of colors. And if it's too dark and depressing, it kind of takes away from the comedic aspects of it with regards to her character. So I think that is their justification for why it appeared that way. And I think that that's somewhat plausible, but I would have had it just a little bit darker. And like you, I think that the city itself is a character in the mythos. And I think that showing a little more of the crime and the cynicism amongst the citizens and the dark, depressive tone of the city, I think that should have shined through more. It was like they were only focusing on Black Mask being a gangster in the midst of everything else. I understand that they kind of wanted to not ignore, but kind of brush off any connection to Batman so that people wouldn't ask the obvious question, where's Batman during all of this? Um, which, diehard comic fans might ask. So they tried to skirt around that as best they could and with what they did.
There were shots I expected Spider-Man to swing by, to be honest with you. When it was out in the middle of the day, it felt so New York. And then, there is the fact that Harley Quinn, she's a quirky girl with a Queen's accent. I do like a quirky girl with Queen's accents. So I definitely warms my heart. But it did make it feel more specific to New York than it felt like Gotham City, and I don't know if that was just oversights or just the fact that maybe they undervalued the tone that the city should have. Even Batwoman, for all of the flaws I think it has, it does seem to capture the Gotham City vibe whether it's daytime or nighttime. I always feel like I'm in that imaginary city, not in another place. So.
Right.
I didn't think it was I wasn't a big fan of that choice. We'll just leave it at that.
Right. And I concur. I just also, like you, think that that's what they were going to, with regards to the lens in which you saw it during the daytime, was because of Harley Quinn and so forth and so on. I guess I understand that, but I personally would have gone a different direction, as you have stated. So,
yeah. So, let's talk about one more elephant in the room, or I should say the Joker in the room. They clearly tried to write around Jared Leto and his lack of presence. I'm on record in the previous review. I didn't hate Jared Leto's performance. It wasn't particularly inspired, but I didn't hate it. I know a lot of people did. I thought they did a decent job of explaining why he wasn't there, and I guess overall I was kind of okay with it, although there were times where I could tell that they weren't quite sure how to find that balance, and I don't think that the Black Mask, at least this iteration of him, was a worthy replacement villain. He was just a gangster that liked to wear a mask sometimes, and that was fine. But I didn't think it had the flair that he was no Joker. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, my idea with regards to the Joker. As Jared Leto's portrayal of the Joker, I actually liked Jared Leto's portrayal of the Joker. I did not like the writing for Jared Leto's interpretation of the Joker. Let's be clear. It's not his acting for me. It was more or less the writing that he had to work with. And I think that
I'd agree with that.
I think that, like, for instance, with Chris Nolan's The Dark Knight, when you have Heath Ledger's Joker, it was something, not only was it a good portrayal by the actor, but it was good writing, and it gave you the mystery of who the Joker was, but it also left a trail of bodies. And I think that in the Jared Leto interpretation, it tried to be a little bit too much of its own thing, as opposed to hitting the beats with the writing that it should have as Joker. And they did not give him the screen time and opportunity to actually explore his interpretation of the character. So I think that that's where it suffered most. I'm glad that they did not put the Joker in this film more, because it would have served to me as a distraction, and it would have been something that would have taken the spotlight off of Harley. I think that what they did when they showed the flashbacks in her memory of, like, when they were tattooing the clown face on the guy's face, or her blowing up Axis chemicals because she was tired of the Joker's crap, then, that was enough.
Yep.
The only other thing that I could have seen happen maybe is if they showed some news footage of him behind, bars, that he'd been captured by the Batman again or something like that, very peripheral, I think. And I think that that's what was best for this film.
Yeah, I'm sure you noticed she had a drawing of him up there. She was throwing darts at that. I thought,
Right.
I thought a big giggle out of that. So,
Right.
that's all I really have. Maybe we get to our final comments and put the rankings up. What do you think?
I agree. I think that with me, so I'm, as far as the number of towers of 1 through 5, I'm going to give it a 3.5. I think that it's good. It could have been a whole lot better where the Black Mask was concerned. I think that hopefully, and another thing, they killed the character of the Black Mask at the end of this, which was another wasted opportunity for that character to have had future confrontations with the Batman, which is what most fans of the character would have wanted to see. It's again DC putting the cart before the horse. So the execs at Warner, if you're listening, please listen to the fans, because you're going to continue to beat your heads against the wall, not listening to people who actually have love for the characters, as opposed to making a decision from someone in a suit that has absolutely no idea what they are doing or who they are dealing with. So, it gets 3.5 towers from me. What about you, RJ?
Well, I'm giving it 4, and I'm gonna take a moment to kind of explain my ranking system and my train of thought on most of these, because years ago I gave a high rating to Spy Kids, like almost a perfect score, and people were like, "Are you saying this is as good as Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz or anything?" And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. The reason I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 is because I look at every movie as, what was it trying to do? What were its goals? And did it hit those goals? And to me, if you want to watch, it's literally a trashy girl power movie, I think, was what they wanted to make. Now, depending on what you thought of the additional characters and how it adheres to the DC universe, there are people that are going to come in with a lot of expectations beyond that. But I think if you're making something that's just kind of an enjoyable, popcorn munching, good time, I think that was really what they wanted to do. And I think 4 out of 5 is a fair ranking for the fact that if you're just going to watch it and kind of quasi turn your brain off and you want action with some comedy, it absolutely worked for me. It's a pretty movie. The action is well filmed. Margot Robbie totally brings it in spades, along with a lot of the supporting characters you've mentioned. I got to scroll back up here on our notes. Oh, you're not supposed to know about the notes. I mentioned the notes, John.
You'll get logged later.
Yes. Rosie Perez, I thought, was great. And I enjoyed everyone else as well, but I wanted to give her a special shout out. I really, really liked a lot of what she did when she was still in the police headquarters. And I'm not gonna spoil it, but I'll say there's a point where her civilian clothes get messed up, and she has to find something from the from the prison locker room. It's amazing. I thought that was just great. I totally was on board for what they were going for, and I think they hit their marks. Whether that's going to please the DC comic fans so much, I'm not the one to say that. I think John's spoken better about that than I can. I just know, as someone who is kind of a quasi-muggle to the DC universe and the comic interpretations, I got what I came for, and so I've ranked it pretty high accordingly. So take that. Your mileage may vary.
All right. I think that's fair enough. I think that you have our scores, and the thing that you need to do, our viewers, is if you haven't seen the film, make sure you go out and check it out. And we'd like to hear from you guys. So make sure that you bring comments down in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Let us know If you agreed with what I thought or what RJ thought, or maybe you disagreed with what I thought or what RJ thought, give us your opinion on the film. We'd like to hear from you. And please be sure to subscribe to our show so that you can get all of our episodes as they aired. This is a weekly show, so just so you know that, every week we will be producing new shows. So, please subscribe and like the episodes also, please, especially ones that you really dig and that you think that the production value was great on. And we'd like to hear from you. You can reach me and see all that I do and everything going on with me at johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they hear from you or see what's going on with you, RJ?
rjsullivanfiction.com. And from there, you can find my Facebook and my Twitter and read my blog, and everything that you need to know is right there.
Same for me. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. So with no further ado, I want to wish everyone the best. And until next time, bye.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.